EFF leader Julius Malema says Hamas can't be blamed for the deadly attack against Israel earlier this month.
Malema says Hamas's defense of the Palestinian people and the fight for freedom is the only option in light of Israel's continued occupation of Palestine.
Addressing supporters outside the Israeli Embassy in Pretoria, he called for the boycott of all products from Israel and for the Israeli Embassies to be shut down across the continent.
Free, free! Palestine! Free, free!
Palestine! Painting the streets of the capital red, the Red Beret also making their voice on the Palestine-Israeli conflict heard. The third largest party in the South African National Assembly says it stands with Palestine unconditionally on the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. The party marched to the Israeli Embassy to voice their opinion. Amongst them were those who have first-hand experience of the atrocities.
I'm from the West Bank. I have family in Gaza and in the West Bank. 20 martyrs from my family in Gaza, they've already passed in those since October 7th. My family in the West Bank, they are very worried because we don't know what's coming. We don't know what's coming. They invade the West Bank every day. They arrest people every day.
What is happening right now in Palestine, it's part of our international legal action toward, defending our dignity, defend our freedom, defend our people in Palestine.
The EFF members heeded the call and came out in their numbers, along with members of other organizations.
What I have a problem with is the African National Congress that had a march on Friday, but they talk with a split tongue. They talk from both sides of their mouths. On the one hand, they say they stand for freedom of Palestine, but they still pay lip service to the so-called two-state solution, which is no solution at all.
It's not about just the Palestinian people, but it's about lives, where people are getting bombarded on a regular basis for the last many years, 75 years. And it's time now that the world stands up, and we're very disappointed at the injustice of America and UK in particular, that has been providing more arms to actually bombard an oppressed nation.
Not holding back while addressing those in attendance here, Malema said it was time for South Africa and other African countries to shut down the Israeli embassies on the continent.
You bomb a hospital and you say you are looking for Hamas, but you are killing innocent children. There is nothing wrong Hamas did. This folk tongues and people speaking in parables and we don't know what they are hearing, what they are saying, it's wrong. When you are oppressed, the only option you have is to fight. And that's what Hamas is doing.
The EFF leader also called on a boycott of a South African retailer.
Comrades, Woolworths has got a responsibility by end of this month to remove every product on their shelves that comes from Israel. If they don't remove products from Israel, we'll go and remove them ourselves.
The party says it will announce its next step soon to intensify its stance when it comes to the Palestine-Israeli conflict. SABC News, Pretoria.
Our SABC News reporter Khayelihle Khumalo was there at those protests, but also interviewed the Israeli ambassador to South Africa, and we played excerpts of that interview for our viewers a little bit earlier on. Kai, good evening to you and welcome. Militant action, not unexpected, promised and threatened by the EFF. Just share with us a little bit more about how those protests went down and who all was in solidarity.
Well, very much so, Iman. So it was quite a very massive protest. You had also so many other parties as well. Al-Jamaa, you also had the New Kid on the Block by Carl Niehaus as well. Arita was there. really just quite a number of them saying that they are united in calling for the freedom of Palestinians. I mean, they say this has been a very intractable conflict, but also they do say that the international community really should do something to make sure that they do encourage a peaceful settlement. But also something that is quite interesting that was mentioned by Mr. Malema was that they're quite confident that they will win the elections next year in the country, and they will continue to support organizations like Hamas, because as far as they're concerned, they say it's just a long-standing issue of the territorial dispute, of the occupation of the land of the Palestinians. But also, I mean, Iman, you reach out to the Israelis as well.
Actually, let me come then to that question. The support, the Israeli ambassador said, if you support Hamas, then you're supporting terrorism. He also said, when you asked the question around the popular uprisings or the protest action across South Africa in support of the Palestinians, what he thought of that, he was saying that there was complementary protests in support of the Israeli cause, and it was a matter of opinion, to paraphrase what he said. What did you make of his answer, and just maybe share how he responded with our viewers as well?
I think he was quite determined that whatever Israel is doing really is about their own sovereignty, it's about self-defense, it's about making sure that they dismantle the military capabilities of Hamas. So that has been the argument that he has been using. But also something that was quite interesting in his own observation as well was the situation in Gaza, saying that really it's quite tough that, civilians are caught up in this. But also really saying that it's quite important to understand that as much as the issue polarizes South Africans, they still do enjoy support from the Friends of Israel, from the Jewish Board of Deputies based in South Africa. So they still do have the groupings who are sympathizing with them, but also painting a very grim picture about what happened in Israel, saying about 1,400 people died, and a lot of people are still traumatized in light of what happened with the incursion on the 7th of October.
A lot of sadness and grieving on both sides, undoubtedly. This has been a moment that has shaken not only those two regions or that region, but a lot of people who care about peace and justice. And perhaps if there's time, we'll circle back to that one. In terms of, and I imagine Durka will be your next stop then, Khayelihle, to talk about whether there is the possibility of closing the Israeli embassies, if there have been, the Israeli embassy, if there has been any commentary around that so far. Maybe just you can update our viewers on that. And also, organizations and retailers like Woolworths who, are facing the promised action of the EFF.
That's right, man, especially because with South Africa, what has always been the position of South Africa is that for them it's quite important to reach out to both sides, because immediately once you cut off the diplomatic ties, so then you're going to lose the Israelis. So it's quite important. So what they did is the downgrading of the diplomatic ties, turning South Africa's embassy in Tel Aviv into a liaison office, just in terms of the issues of trade and other interests as well. But something that is quite interesting in this regard as well is that there has been also these global marches that you have seen. A lot of people really just sympathizing with the Palestinians. But something also that we saw this past weekend, Iman, we saw President Cyril Ramaphosa in Cairo in Egypt with other leaders as well, calling for the cessation of hostilities, but also pushing for the humanitarian aid, because if you only just allow 20 trucks, that's just a drop in the ocean in light of a very massive, enormous, catastrophic challenge facing the people of Gaza.
And that is what I was hoping we'd have time to circle back to, and we're almost at the end of our interview, is the intransigence at the beginning to do that, having to have these talks where the US was kind of mediating how that would happen, the entry of humanitarian aid across the Rafah crossing, the downgrading of what that aid was initially intended to be, and from what we understand with the latest reports, the lack of fuel, which is needed for things to be powered up in an area where there is no electricity. Was that something that the ambassador commented on on the one hand, commitments that they've been making to make sure that humanitarian aid gets through, but the length of time it's taking to do that and has taken to do that, as well as the volume of what was ultimately allowed through.
Well, absolutely, Iman, especially because it's a very dire situation. In fact, we got an opportunity to speak to some Palestinians. There was one gentleman who said, what is so sad about the situation in Gaza is that you really don't need an ID. You literally have to write literally in your arm the name that you have so that they can identify, the person who has just perished, because that's how terrible the situation has gone. But in as far as the ambassador is concerned, he really didn't say much in terms of how would they make sure that in terms of the facilitation of the aid, especially in Gaza, but he really spoke about how they are really working so hard in making sure that they do see that coexistence of the Palestinians and also themselves as an independent state as Israel. But also, most importantly, Iman, I think what has been concerning is how also an institution like the United Nations Security Council has been supremely divided in terms of, the resolutions that have been crafted, whether you're looking at Brazil, what they tried, what the US is trying, and many others as well. So I think that's a very concerning situation.
A lot of commentators have said this is a moment that will come back to haunt the UN in some ways, in terms of its presence in the world in a contemporary sense and its decision-making. A lot to talk about, and we certainly will have ample opportunity over the next days to do that. Thank you so much, our SABC news reporter, Khayelihle Khumalo.